Chapter 9, it's spelling! Yes, Chapter 9, assessing and teaching spelling. Now, I've never been a very good speller. I've gotten a little better over the years with all the writing I've done, but my 10-year-old son is phenomenal. In fact, sometimes I have to check with him to see how to spell something. But this will be good. It's fairly short, and it's good stuff. Chapter 9, spelling!
Well, Chapter 9, assessing and teaching spelling. First of all, it just starts out the chapter just talking about spelling, but here's the highlights of what we'll do here in the outline. First of all, just on assessing. And like we did in reading and in speech, the first part of teaching, especially you as special ed teachers, will be to determine where and how to teach based on these processes. So we'll spend some time, but the bulk of our time will be about teaching spelling and these different approaches: a rule-based, a multilinguistic, multi-sensory approach, test study, test technique, fixed and flow, and some additional considerations. Okay, and then this is a pretty big chunk too about activities that you can do. And then, like I did before, I'll have you help me with these games, the self-correcting materials, commercial things, and then this software. So that's kind of what the chapter looks like: assessment, and then teaching approaches, activities to teach it, and then these interactive things here. Okay, let's take a look at Chapter 9. Well, and I took this out of the textbook, just somebody looking at words and spelling words, but this one here I find more interesting. You ever play this game? I'm sure most of you have. It's very interesting, and here's a big word here that was a lot of score. I suspect there was a couple things here, but none of this is good for spelling. This is just good for words. I really struggle with this. I played with linguistic. A friend of ours is kind of a linguist, was an English major and taught English. I was just shocked at how she could come up with words. I didn't see words like she could. But you want to get kids involved, and there is a kids version, a younger version of this that's a little bit simpler that you may want to take on. But as you know, anytime you can involve some kind of a game, kids can tend to get more interested. If you're working with kids that are challenged in spelling or challenged in learning, anything you can do to get them engaged seems to be a big plus, but scramble. So first of all, I want to go jump back to the textbook if I could here, and just start out with some of these authors' thoughts on spelling. Spelling is the forming of words through the conventional arrangement of letters. Is that profound? Probably not. Talks about these different levels here. Gentry says there's 2 phases to learning spelling. The first phase is just learning to spell, and it has these 4 levels in it, as I have here in the notes for you. And I'll ask you to make some notes about each of these phases. Phase 1, learning to spell, and Phase 2 on correct and automatic learning. Okay. So here's Phase 1, is pre-communicating spelling, and it gives you letters like this is, from age 3 to 5 is that early level. And then semi-phonetic spelling, 5 to 6-year-olds, and then phonetic is they can represent all their sounds with their own letters. 6, and then just transitional spelling. They begin to use conventional alternatives for sounds, and that is 7 to 9. And then when you actually get into spelling, it's generally about 2nd grade when you formally introduce spelling, that 8 to 9-year-old area, where you actually start to instruct in spelling. And down here it says typically a 9 to 11-year-olds will break words into syllables and add inflectional endings like the EDs and ESs and INGs, like that. And then by the time 11 to 14, they can do more of the morphemes, the endings, stuff on them like that. Okay. This is kind of interesting down here. The 26 letters makes 44 phonemes, those sounds. And get this, 500 spellings to represent those 44 different phonemes. And it gives you a bunch of those here on the 2nd level. Students have trouble recognizing words in reading. Usually have poor spelling skills as well. Now, did you notice that spelling isn't one of our categories in South Dakota? Let me just take you back and show you something here. Now this is from our SPED 100 class, and this is the LD Learning Disabilities definition from IDEA. Okay, difficulties in understanding oral or written language resulting in imperfect abilities to do the following things. First of all is listening, thinking, speaking, reading, writing, spelling, math calculations. Okay, but then each state got to interpret theirs, and here's what the state of South Dakota says: that they have to achieve commensurate with ability and age in one of the more of the areas. And this is what South Dakota says: this 1.5 standard deviations that we talked about before in achievement. Discrepancy, meaning the difference between achievement, is those achievement tests you learn to give, and this intellectual abilities, which is known as the IQ. Okay, here's their areas: oral language, listening. Okay, oral language, listening. Now we don't really assess those. That generally comes from the speech therapist from back a couple chapters ago, so we don't really deal with that. But here's the ones we deal with: comprehension, okay, reading, and then basic reading skills, reading comprehension, math calculations, math reasoning, which is story problems. But the one here is written expression. See, we don't have spelling as a category. So if spelling is their issue, it has to be so significant that it changes this writing score, because you can't qualify somebody in spelling. It has to be in one of these areas. You knew that, right? One time I had a student that had 101 IQ, I believe, had a 75 in spelling. Everything else was normal, but he had a 75 in spelling, and that's why he was referred. But I couldn't qualify him in spelling. So then what happens? Yeah, they go back to the regular classroom, and you hope there's a good, strong teacher there to help them. So let's go back to where we were on this now. Okay, so that's it. Generally, if there's trouble with reading, there's trouble with spelling. And you will find that out quickly. So it's very unusual if somebody just has a spelling deficiency. Not very often you'll find kids that are problem readers that are good spellers. And here's some of the challenges. One, down here, reading is a decoding process, which the reader receives clues like in the context. But spelling is encoding, which the learner must respond without the benefits of complex visual or of complete visual stimulus. There's fewer clues for spelling. And they need to concentrate on every letter and every word. You know, when you're reading, you can kind of figure out words by looking at a couple letters and looking at it in context, even looking at pictures, even figure out what the story's about. But for spelling, you've got to know every single letter for it to be right. So that creates the problems in spelling. In general, normal students spell with an accuracy of 70 to 100% at the grade level, and to be normal, and tend to make spelling errors that are readable, good phonetic equivalents of the dictionary dictated word. Meaning, most of us will teach our kids in our schools to read phonetically and spell phonetically. So, if a kid's well taught in that area, even if he spells the word wrong, it's readable. My oldest son he's a little better now, but through 4th and 5th grade, but very phonetic. So he could always, whenever he spelled them, you always knew what the word was. But if it didn't follow the phonetic rules, he got it wrong. Now my 10-year-old is a phenomenal speller, and I don't know how he spells because we never see him work on it. He always, I don't know, we never helped him. But when my older boy was studying spelling, every week we labored over these spelling words, and his mom had all kinds of strategies how to remember them, because he was a phonetic speller, very readable. Here, this is interesting too. To spell a word correctly, the student must apply various abilities, including being able to read the word. Okay, now that you got to be laughing at me. What does that mean? Well, you'll work with kids with learning disabilities that don't know some of the words, and you'll be trying to teach them to spell words that they don't know, that they can't pronounce. Very hard to teach a kid to pronounce a word 1 minute and have them spelling it correctly the next. Well, that creates some issues in spelling. So that brings us to assessment of spelling skills. Variety of techniques assessment, and it goes like this. Let me take you back here. 2nd grade is when that formal spelling starts, and then this 9 to 11-year-olds is where they learn to break words into syllables and stuff. And then 11, 14, they start to focus on those morphemes and endings and stuff. Okay, and here's the spelling. There's formal assessments, and you know some of these here, but this Iowa tests of basic spelling. And then we have some acronyms here. This Kaufman test, We call this the KTEA, if you had that in assessment course. The PIAT, the Peabody, PIAT, Individual Achievement Test, and then the RAT, Wide Range of Achievement Test. And then each one has a little breakdown of what they're for. And so depending on what you're studying, what you're assessing, what you want to know about the child has a lot to do with how you're going to, which of these tests you give. And often you'll use what's in your school. But read through each of these as to what they're for. And from a formal, here's some diagnostic tests. These were the achievement tests, the standardized tests, norm tests. And these are the diagnostic, meaning to diagnose. That's what that means there. To diagnose. Okay, test of orthographic competence, test of written spelling, word identification and spelling test. And the book takes you through all these. And then these formal ones, this criterion. Remember what criterion was? Criteria. We talked about this before. The most well-known criterion test is the driver's test. You got to get a certain score or you don't pass. Bergance is part of that. And here's the informal spelling assessments. And again, I'm going to ask you to be part of this, to bring in information about these 6 informal tests, because they're the most common that you'll use is determining how to and where to start teaching these kids. You will deliver these and score these and analyze these. And so we'll spend a little time on those, and I'll ask you to bring those in. Here's the formal spelling ones, achievement and diagnostic tests. And it takes you through some of these. And I didn't give you these. Here's that test of written spelling. And it gives a little description of there. And the descriptions are better here. Here's the Bergance, is that criterion reference test. And it walks through there. Here's that RAT. Skill writing one's name, letters and stuff. So again, so you got to know what you want here. I mean, if you're at this level, it's just letters, names, more simple. This one here, accessibility to identify correct spelling. So if that's our issue, and I've always said that was my strength, is I could identify words that were spelled wrong in my reading. There's that KTEA. Okay, then a criterion references describes that performance in levels that of a certain criteria. Then here's the informal ones. Teacher can obtain diagnostic information regarding spelling through the structured observation and evaluations of attitudes. And so, just like we did in reading, part of your assessment will be what is their attitude about spelling. And why does that matter? Well, it's kind of like reading from the standpoint that if they are a frustrated reader, they are a frustrated speller that's had a history of not being successful, it's going to directly affect the way they approach spelling and the way they approach you and your teaching. And so that will be part of your analysis on your approach with each child, each student. Okay, so there's these informal tests, a dictated spelling test, as we just had on the notes here. All right, so let's look at first the dictating spelling test, and this is the kind of information you want to bring in. Dictated word list of increasing difficulty instructional level to determine when the student achieved 70 to 90% accuracy. You just dictate the spelling test, and you kind of look for patterns and stuff like that. Here we'll talk about these two here, Shanker and Cockrum. Note that 100. This is very interesting. 100 top high-frequency words account for 60% of the words in their writing. So just 100 words, and you'll cover 60% of their writing. And then they come up with this, that 18% of their writing is these kinds of words that are called articles. The, of, and, to, is, in, you, little words. Nail them, they're easy. And then we get down here to a list of words that they're regular. Commonly misspelled words: ache, fasten, nickel, scratch, double. See, if you try and apply phonetics to this, let me try this. In your notes right now, stop this and spell this word ache phonetically. How it would be spelled phonetically. And circle it or put a square around it so I see it. How you would spell that word phonetically. And you'll see these words that they don't follow the rules. Then the next, go ahead and do that now and then come back. Then the next one here is this informal spelling inventory. About 15 words should be chosen from the first grade book and 20 words from each book, 2nd through 8th grade. Okay, got it? You're just selecting words. It's called informal spelling inventory. You're using words out of your spelling program. And you randomly select those words, and how you do that. And then you give it to them about 7-second intervals. And then as soon as they have incorrectly 6 consecutive words incorrectly, that's the frustration level. You stop. And then how you analyze it is if, at whatever level they're 90 to 100%, that's considered the instructional level, or that's considered the still achievement level, mastery. And then the instructional level is 75 to 89%. And that's where you would start teaching then. Not where they got 6 consecutive wrong, because that's the frustration level. You would back up from that. Whatever grade level they're getting 75 to 89%, we would say that's our instructional level. 90 to 100, we'd say that's mastery. Okay, so that's what a informal reading inventory looks like. And then a curriculum-based measurement, you take that from a given spelling curriculum, whatever your school uses, and it can be regularly based things or whatever. And then this tells you how to evaluate the curriculum-based approach. I didn't give you this dictating spelling list. That's here for you. And then when a teacher orally presents words from a list, the student must produce a spelling of the word during the dictation task. In other words, you give them the spelling test. Give them about 2 words by saying each word twice and using homonyms in a sentence. And there should be a 7-second interval between that for words 4, 10 seconds for the younger ones. And then this is interesting how you evaluate this. You look very specifically at letters. For example, if the word lazy, you got 5 correct letters sequences in a row. But in misspelling, if you stuck an S in here, they're saying there's 3 sequences that are correct, but 2 that are incorrect. And that explains that in the curriculum-based. And here is those procedures, curriculum-based procedures. I didn't give you that. You don't need that. Okay, and then spelling error analysis, of course, a lot like the reading error analysis. Spelling error can be analyzed with written composition as well as a dictated test. And if you want to really see if a kid can spell, you do it in their writing. And again, I take you back to my Alex, who was got so he could spell fairly decent on the tests, but 3 minutes later would spell the same words incorrectly on a composition, because he had this complete disconnect between spelling and writing. And I think that's the chance you always take when you teach spelling in isolation, meaning as a class, lists. And you'll find later in here we'll talk about bringing their writing words into their spelling. But you try and look for patterns of things like reversing's and incorrect vowels and wrong sounds and homonyms, and you try and identify what those are and teach very specifically to that. And this is interesting too, the graph of weekly performance in spelling by the correct letter sequences and stuff. Then the closed procedure is more visual. Complete a sentence, and just like in the reading we did the close thing, talked about the close thing in reading. It can be a multiple choice thing also. And then probes are like a math probe is done by times, like 1-minute timings, to see how many they can spell right in the 1-minute timing. So again, you are going to bring that information in here on assessments of spelling. Teaching spelling skills. 9 spelling competencies enable a student to be an effective speller. Can you believe that? If you can get these 9 competencies, you're an effective speller. Huh. 9-4. I gave that. I clipped this for you to bring in, these competencies in spelling. But it says if you don't get these in, you have to have the very explicitly have spelling taught to get that. This is part of that note that the highly effective spelling programs teach spelling through phonetic, whole word, and morphemic approach. And what that's saying is it's hard to rely on just one. And that's the problem sometimes when you buy commercial programs, it has one approach. And so we're challenging you as a teacher to come up with these different spelling approaches together. Okay, allowing students to choose words from a writing, that kind of thing. All right. Exceptions to phonic rules. Oh yeah, Shanker and Cochran again note that the words most frequently misspelled, nearly all students are, exceptions to phonetic rules. Realize only about half of their spelling words follow the phonetic rules, so that to me that's kind of an understatement. But they found that the most common errors were that of phonetic rules in all subject areas.
Let's look at this rule-based instruction. Spelling instruction can be based on teaching rules and generalizations. Rule-based instruction outperforms students who perceive traditional spelling instructions. As we see that there, let me jump back here and talk about this. And sometimes, maybe some of you had spelling taught to you this way based on rules, and I know watching my kids and their school had a series of rule-based things that they were taught. This is interesting, and you'd love to know how this data works. But these three researchers here in 2000 printed this, examined the effects of rule-based approach compared to traditional spelling instruction, found that students receiving rule-based outperformed students who received traditional spelling. But like I say, you wonder how they counted it, determined what that was. So here's the three rule-based: linguistic approach, phonics approach, and rule-based. And these are all considered part of the rule-based instruction. Linguistic is teaching spelling is based on the idea that there's regularity. Hey, like that word. And phoneme grapheme correspondence. And the phonics is teaching spelling stress phoneme grapheme relationships with just parts of words, in other words, sounding it out. And rule-based, it puts them together, both linguistic and phonics. Only spelling rules and generalizations that apply to a large number of words have few exceptions. Should be taught. Okay. Well, let me just keep going. This is the multilinguistic. I need to say that word. Multilinguistic approach. This is where we start to get into the multiple things. Teaching spelling instruction can utilize a multilinguistic approach to focus on phonetic, orthographic, and morphological. I like that word too. Utilize a prescriptive assessment that matches the instruction of the specific weakness. This is where you've analyzed what the weakness is. For example, the misspelling of a student are primarily phonological, which is often the case of students with learning disabilities. The spelling intervention would focus heavily on phonological aspects of language. Again, when you look at this, what it makes me think of is the kids that have reading challenge, that are having a hard time reading. Obviously, they bring those same weaknesses into spelling, and that's sounding out and knowing what words are. You know what else comes in spelling is a vocabulary. Not written here, but I think this is why my younger son does well, because his vocabulary is large for his age, and your awareness of words and the numbers of words help. But a student with a learning disability that has a low reading level doesn't have as much vocabulary to work from. So we had multilinguistic, and now this is the multisensory approach. Remember, we're on this here a thing here, these different skills in spelling and different approaches here. We did the rule-based, then we looked at multilinguistic, now multisensory, and then we'll do these last study test techniques, fixed and flow approach. Now this multisensory is some of this you're familiar with, but I'm going to ask you to help me with this. Involves visual, auditory, motor. And I still think this is, especially with kids with learning disabilities, this is how you want to approach spelling, is to bring all three together: seeing, hearing, touching, doing, multi. So first we have the Fernald, the Gillingham, the Kearney-Draveman from '93 used the modified right-say spelling, and then cover-right method. Let's go back to the text and look at what those things are. First, I'll just fly over this stuff about the rule-based. Rule-based instruction outperforms students who receive traditional. We knew that. And here's these three things you want to bring in rule-based. Talks about linguistic and spelling. Words are selected according to their particular sounds. Alright. Rule-based, and then phonetic approaches. Okay, here's the multilinguistic approach based on the theory that skills develop across these three linguistic areas. There's the multisensory approach. Okay, and in this multisensory, here's what I want you to bring in. Here's the Fernald method. Multisensory approach involves 4 sensory modals. Okay. There's some stuff about Fernald. Don't bring all this in, or if you do, shorten this up a little bit. That'll get to be too much in your notes. The Gillingham we've talked about before in reading. Use an alphabetic system with repetition and drill, and it talks about exactly what that is. And then down here, this Kearney-Draveman modified right-say intervention, and he prescribes exactly what that looks like down here. And again, don't bring this all in, but bring some of this. Then here's the cover and write thing that you want to bring some of this in. Describes exactly how that is. Then we jump to the next method. As we go down this list, the test, study, test. Okay. And this sounds so familiar to me because this is not only the way I was taught, it's the way I taught. Student is given a pre-test. You had pre-tests when you were studying spelling. Pre-test beginning of each unit of study, and generally that's each week. The words the student misspells on the pre-test become their study list. That's their study spelling words for that week. After instruction, another test determines the degree of mastery. Okay, and that's usually that Friday test. Progress chart kept, and words that are misspelled on the second test are added to the words for the following unit of study. And this is what frustrated the students I taught, that they'd miss words and oh my goodness, they'd show up next week. And of course, one of the challenges is what to do when there's too many words. And you come up with this study test plan. Now, when my oldest one was in the elementary, some of the teachers would have deals where if you got like a 90, I forget, a 95%, 90 or 95% on the pre-test, you didn't have to take the test on Friday, which was always his goal, to study. And again, my younger one, I don't know. We never saw his spelling. He just did it all away from us. Okay. So you read about that part, the study test technique. And then here, the study strategies. I clipped this here, these two things here for you to bring in. This is more of the study test part. Alright, this here, let me, let's go down to fixed word lists. Let's see if I have that here. Yeah, you're going to bring something in about each of these. Describe those a little bit. I talked about this. I say in these, just be a little careful, especially kids with learning disabilities, rehashing those same words. Okay, if I were teaching that, I would put it in writing, have them writing them in sentences and stuff to use them. But sometimes very hard. And these are the things that clip for you. Say the word, write and say the word, check the word, trace the word. This is really a multi-sensory thing too, especially with the finger. Just to trace those, write the word from memory and check. One of the things you'll find with these types of things too is not too many words, or it's too hard to hold that much. So really decide what words you want them to know. And here's that one. Say a word, point to the word, repeat, cover. Say, why I want you to have these is because you're going to work with some kids in spelling, and you're going to run out of ideas. They're going to struggle learning them, and they're going to be somewhat unmotivated, and you're going to really be looking and searching for strategies. Remember this thing with these mnemonics? We've talked about this before. Visual mnemonics, how you can do this. This is how my wife would help my oldest one. Constantly come up with mnemonics for words for him. He never said it helped, but it must have, because his spelling grades were always better when she did that. Student visualizes the word, attempts to see that mnemonic aid presented in the word, writes the word from memory. Students can generate associations. Some of you do that to remember spelling or other things. And I've known a lot of folks that use mnemonics to remember other things. The self-questioning strategy. Do I know this word? How many syllables do I hear in the word? Will I write the word the way I think it's spelled? And again, that's where you can kind of run into trouble if it said in the text that 50% of words follow that a phonetic approach. Fixed then flow. Fixed is a new list of words assigned each week, right? That's the way you were taught. Words may be either somewhat unfamiliar or completely unknown. Aye. Students practice independently and practice at their own rate. Or the flow. Words are dropped from each student's list when mastered correctly, or 2 or 3 consecutive days. And that's what you got to have sometimes, some kind of criteria of what mastered is, right? Not just the first time you spell them right. Oh yeah, kids with learning disabilities can really have a hard time holding that sometimes, and it's individualized. The student does not spend time practicing the words they already know. You and I'd be for that. Spelling words taught students with learning problems initially should be limited to high frequency words. Spelled words from their writings. Again, that is provided they are writing. And here's what happens in that. They're not very good readers. Their reading levels are low, so their writing levels are low, and they have a hard time. And then you want them to write, and what you end up with, older kids that do about very small writings, very short sentences, with very small symbolic words. So therefore, you look at their writing and there are no spelling words in them, because they tend to use only words that they can spell. And I always found the kids too that found it like a punishment if you brought words out of their writing to make them into spelling words. Recommend a weekly spelling list to be 6 to 12 words, and I think even 12 can be a little high. We used to shoot around 7 to 8 words. So emphasize a common structural element if possible. 2 or 3 words in the list introduced daily. And I like that approach, that you would daily introduce words instead of the whole list at once. Problem is, if you're using some kind of a spelling program that doesn't introduce it that way, it's a little hard to go against that. Visual images, words the student misspelled and written compositions may be included in their spelling program. I say that you may get some pushback from kids that are really struggling if you do that, but that can also be effective if you get them into a good writing program. You get them producing words, especially on the computer, where it's easy to edit and fix and move around and change the look. I'm going to guess you would get less pushback. And again, the dictionary too, I think the electronic dictionaries, where you can now write mouse words and get help with them and stuff, would help more. Some additional considerations in secondary level help the adolescent understand the social and practical significance of correct spelling. And yeah, again, you want to get them in writing. It has no significance if they're not writing. None. And we talk about social. The social part of it is you're writing publicly. Like the other day on one of my classes, I tried to write the word antecedent on the board, and for some reason I stuck 2 N's in there. And I didn't even catch it till the end of the class period, but created some social pressure. But kids with learning disabilities, that doesn't matter. So if you're especially at the secondary level, because you kind of get away from spelling class there. And so there, if you start to try and teach this spelling in isolation, it doesn't connect to anything. So what is that practical significance of it? and it's in their writing. And the students' interests, so start spelling and writing about their stuff they know about. Now we say interests, and all kids have some interests, but what I found is a lot of times they even know what their interests were. And so the word I would use more than here is what they know about. Have them write things they know about, because they all know about something. Vocational words can be emphasized. That's life skills type things. That's teach spelling in conjunction with other activities. That's what I'm saying, especially at secondary. Is in there other things they're studying. Because if it's just spelling, they have a history of not doing well in spelling, you're going to get some real resistance. You have to really be on your game. So these spelling activities, again, I'm going to ask you to help me a little bit with some of these. And the book goes on then for several things. Here's some spelling games. I'm going to ask you to hook those up. Spelling materials. Spelling programs. These are commercial ones that you buy the program, your school would buy them. And then software programs. Surely you've heard some of these, like Spelling Blaster. If you've worked in elementary spelling at all, you've heard of some of these. Okay, Chapter 9, Assessing and Teaching Spelling.